In the summer of 2016, my parents sold the family cabin to finance a move to Victoria, BC, something they'd been dreaming of since retiring. In anticipation of losing our recreational retreat, I purchased a piece of hay, woods, and wetlands to the southeast of the lake the previous year. My dream was to build a suitable winter dwelling, nestled in the trees where the forest meets the field, before the ice and snow gripped our land to keep us warm for the long, cold seasons ahead. It was late July now, and my vacation days would be eaten up through August with plans to drive my own family west, camping along the way, to join my folks in warming their new home on the coast. Throughout our vacation west, I was busy researching, designing, and estimating costs for our tiny abode. Money, or the lack thereof, would be a major factor in making compromises and design choices. There were other considerations as well. The cabin had to be under 100 square feet in order to avoid not only costly building and development permits, but also to ensure our property taxes would not change from agricultural to residential or recreational, a substantial shift in money for sure. It needed to sleep my family of 4 and be heated using the free resources of our woods. Weekdays being filled with work and home life meant the cabin, if it were to happen at all, would have to be built on weekends, and mostly on my own. Days before we headed west, a friend and I snuck away to the property, and having paid a local contractor some beer to level a small pad of land down to the heavy clay base, we constructed and insulated a foundation and floor for the tiny cabin in under half a day, thus providing us the start to our tiny abode. There was no turning back now. It was September now, and having salvaged, scavenged, and scrounged truckloads of building materials, I was anxious to start framing. And on the second weekend of the month, I was lucky to get a second set of hands to start the process. My cousin Mike and I made our way north with gas for the generator, borrowed saws, and kilos of nails. We framed and sheeted the cabin walls, installed the loft joists and floorboards, and by the end of one day's work, even the ridgepole and rafters were locked and blocked in place. On day 2, we installed the door jamb door, rough fit 2 main windows for the cabin, before wrapping our work in a bale tarp as the storm drew in from the west. It was 2 weeks before I was able to get back up to the property, and this time I only had one day to get the roof on and finish the windows. Fortunately, Mike was willing to jump in again, and my good friend Dave came up for the day as well. After capping the rafters and gable face with fascia, Mike took to the roof and began installing the strapping we'd need to install the steel sheeting. Dave took on the 3 small windows in the front of the cabin and then turned his attention to beginning the trim on the exterior. Although metal sheeting goes up pretty quick and covers a large area, the trim pieces that make the roof watertight can take a good long while, and by the end of the day we were feeling the fatigue. But the roof was on now, and I was grateful for the efforts of friends and family. A week passed, and once again I had a single day of time to come up to the property and get something accomplished. My goal was to close the cabin up tight on the exterior, which meant closing in soffits, sealing and insulating windows and door jamb, complete the trim between the exterior sheathing, and making sure that the elements were no longer going to be an issue. On the prairies, you never know when the weather is going to turn, and as it turned out, I was lucky to get things all sealed up when I did. "5 days can make a big difference in Saskatchewan." The next weekend, I struggled to get the truck onto the property through 50 centimeters of fresh snow. A week into October, and I was very happy to have a warm and dry workspace inside our tiny cabin shell. With the Mr. Heater blasting, I laid in the insulation and vapor barrier, wired lights for an eventual 12-volt solar system, and boarded things up where I could. I was very pleased with the progress by the end of day 2. At this point, I had 7 not full days of work into the cabin, and it was really taking shape. Another 2 weeks passed before any work happened at the cabin again, but I was extra enthusiastic about the work this weekend as I was finally installing the wood stove. I custom-built a wall-mounted heat shield from the roofing top sheet and had fabricated a wood stove stand to mount in front of that. Everything measured up and installed flawlessly. I soon had a fire roaring inside, and the cabin was keeping warm under its own power. I was ecstatic. The flawless install on Saturday meant that I had time to complete the last of the wallboards and interior trim into the evening, which started to make the cabin look like a real home. Sunday, I only had a few hours before I needed to be back in the city, but took the early morning hours to focus on framing interior walls for the pantry and water closet. The 29th of October marked a milestone. My boys accompanied me up to the land this weekend and gave their resounding approval for their new clubhouse, complete with their very own sleeping loft. The boys fashioned a crude ladder out of scrap wood and hundreds of nails, and I nailed up a temporary banister in the loft. They insisted we sleep in the cabin that night, and I honestly couldn't think of a reason why not. We pulled the cushions from the camper trailer, lit the stove, and christened the tiny cabin with a good night's sleep. I got a few hours on Sunday with the boys exploring the woods to add some finishing touches and put some polish on some rough edges. I snapped some pictures designed to entice my wife to join us on the next outing, and we headed back home. Despite a successful pilot run, it was a few weeks before we got back to the cabin. In the meantime, I had crafted a few finishing touches to be installed upon our next excursion, which my wife was happy to join us for. Upon arrival, we were able to install the bench pull-out bed downstairs, a proper fitting ladder and railing for the loft, a sliding barn door for the water closet, and the start of a kitchen counter and cupboards. With these final touches, the cabin was officially functional for a long winter ahead. We had achieved a budget cabin build which measured 96 square feet, slept my family of 4, and the wood stove not only provided warmth, but as luck would have it, served as a fine s'more machine as well. The cabin is now in its 3rd year of protecting us against the elements and provides us with everything we need to enjoy the property and escape from the pressures and nonsense of city life. To be honest, we rarely think of the old family cabin anymore, and when we do, we all agree we wouldn't trade our acres of wild or tiny conveniences for anything.